the human experience is many births. There's the big one at the beginning. There's the next big one 11 or 12 or 13 years later, which is like, whoa, what's happening? Ooh, this is cool. Ooh, this is weird. All that's going on. That's another birth. It's biological, let alone emotional. But then there are many others that happen when you learn a new skill. You travel to a new country, you meet someone, you have a certain teacher. I mean, Mr. Pickett, my high school vocal music teacher, completely changed my life. And I didn't see that coming at all, that I would do any of that. So that was a birth. That was, the midwife was Mr. Pickett in a sense. And so to me, that's what life is. And so instead of thinking, when you have a question about yourself at a certain phase of life, instead of thinking of that as a midlife crisis, why not think of it, oh, there's something supposed to be born now. There's another thing that's supposed to be born, and that this is a normal part of being human. It's not strange. It's not weird. In fact, to lead a life today that is just the same thing, how's that working out for you? If you try that. We live in an age that everything is so unpredictable and uncertain. If you're just stuck in one way and you're convinced life will just always be the same, so therefore you can too, well, it should be pretty obvious by now that it's not. That's kind of not the way it's going to be. So to me, we are all Renaissance humans. Renaissance human is not a term for the creative people. And part of my work is to distinguish between creativity, the artistic expression side of creativity, versus what it takes to lead a fulfilling life, which requires creativity, but not necessarily artistic expression.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Dano, and welcome to Unknowingly Connected, a podcast for people open and curious by nature, with specific interests in the human potential and the greater good. Twice a month, I interview professionals who have gathered their diverse passions or gifts to be in service of human leadership. You will hear from their journey and their techniques, crafted to be within everyone's reach, and explained from a scientific, body, mind, and spiritual perspective. It's all connected, and we might not even know it. Hi. In today's episode, I interviewed Bruce Cryer. Bruce is a Broadway performer, the ex-CEO of the famous HeartMath Institute, and now he's an adjunct faculty at Stanford University, both for the School of Business and the School of Medicine. I found really interesting Bruce's journey and how it moved to being a performer and a CEO, to learning what was the message in his 2 years of serious health issues. In this episode, you will learn about his journey, what is HeartMath, and why creativity and awe are so important. So, good morning, Bruce, and welcome.
Good morning, Stephanie. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, as a start, I would like to go through the very, very beginning of your passions, because I think you started fairly early, for as far as I've seen. And the further I've seen, and I've looked when I've done my research, is when you were 8 years old, when you play your trumpet. Is that it?
Very good. Very good. You found that. Yes, that's true.
Was it the first time that you found a passion for something creative, or did you have anything before?
What a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. You know, I think that's the first time. I don't recall, I mean, other than as a kid, I've enjoyed sports. So that was playing little American sports, baseball and basketball and football, where it was fun for me. But when I was 8, I think it was all the kids in our school were tested for our musical ability and asked if we wanted to learn to play an instrument. And I was tested, and they said, based on the tests, I should play violin. Well, for an 8-year-old boy,
It's a strong thing.
violin, really? No, sorry. I want to play trumpet because my older brother was a trumpet player, and I loved my older brother. And they said, trumpet? Okay, well, why trumpet? And they said, well, if you want to play a brass instrument, because you have a very good ear, which is why we believe you would be very good in violin. But a French horn, it's a brass instrument, but it requires a really, really good ear. So this would kind of, I want to play trumpet. We have one. We have a trumpet. I think I can use my brother. So they let me play trumpet. And so it was very fun as a kid. And I don't know that I would call it a complete passion back then, but it was definitely fun. And this continued. And eventually my parents decided I should have a private teacher. And I got better and better. And by the time I was 16, I was performing in what was called the New Jersey Junior Symphony Orchestra, which were selected college, rather high school age kids who were exceptional musicians, and we were an orchestra from around the state of New Jersey where I lived. So that was kind of like, wow, that's pretty good. But I didn't ever think I would do it, you know, beyond high school, which is what happened. I stopped when high school ended. But yeah, that probably was the first real creative passion that I had.
Oh, great. And what brought you then to performing?
Meaning singing and dancing and
Yes,
that kind of thing. Yeah.
that kind of
So
thing.
yeah, so that same year when I was 16, that I was now in the New Jersey Junior Symphony, our high school hired a new vocal music teacher, and when he came in, the first year they did an opera, they did a Broadway show, they did a holiday show, and it was exceptionally good. And like, where did this come from? It was all the same kids, but performing at a much, much higher level because this teacher was a brilliant singer, a brilliant director. They got him from the Metropolitan Opera. How he came to our little high school, I don't know. And so I was playing in the orchestra for some of these shows. And he also was the choir director of a big church in New Jersey, and he would invite me and some of the other trumpet players to come down for Easter service or Christmas service, to play trumpet as part of the celebration. And so I was getting to know him more and more. And there's one specific show that I think was towards the end of that year, my next to last year in high school. And I was playing down in the orchestra pit for the show that was happening up on the stage. And this gentleman, Mr. Pickett, was conducting the orchestra. And I was just watching the show when I wasn't playing. And I thought, wow, they're having so much fun up there. That looks fun. I would like to be up there. I talked to Mr. Pickett right after the show. And I said, so I really enjoy being in the orchestra, but how do I get up on stage? That looks really fun too. And he said, just sign up. I accept everyone. I said, just sign up. Okay. So I signed up, and the next year, my final year in high school, I was now in the choir, which maybe 100 students, and he begins to work with me. But he seemed to be doing that with all the new kids. And then it seemed like he was working with me more, and several, like almost 2 months into the school year, he finally took me to the back of the big auditorium of the school, because now we were working on songs. He was clearly working with me, and I was just, this is great. I can't believe I actually sound kind of good to myself. And he takes me to the back of the auditorium and says, so all the kids want to know what's the big musical this year, but I'm not telling anyone, but I'm going to tell you. And he named this Broadway show called Carousel. I had no idea what Carousel was, which was good, because he then said, and I'm going to have you play the lead role. And I'm like, what? I don't remember auditioning. There was no audition. Nobody had any idea there was even going to be a show, let alone which show. And he said, well, it won't be for 8 months. This was October. The show wasn't until May. He said, I'll have you sing some solos in the Christmas show. So that'll get you used to being on stage, kind of performing in front of an audience. And I remember having kind of mixed feelings. On the one hand, this is exciting. I mean, he's telling me I've got the lead role. I never wanted that. And on the other hand, kind of like, and I've also never really sung in front of anyone ever.
Mm.
So I wonder if I'll be any good, kind of nervous. But that process, then that year of first the Christmas show and then getting ready and doing the High School Musical was a thrill. And I realized how much I really did love doing it.
Mm.
And 2 years later, I had the lead role in the longest running musical in the world.
Yeah, so
And so
fantastic.
the Fantastics, exactly. Les Romanesques is the name of the novel that the
Mm.
Fantastics was actually based on, Edmond Rostand.
Mm.
And but yeah, it was so it was somewhere in that up here. I think I can do this.
Oh, great. And what about the fantastic then? Was it also something you were looking for? So after your play, you say, okay, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life? Or how did it come that you went to Broadway and play?
Well, I won't share the whole story of how I found that particular show, but the gentleman who created the show saw me doing something for a college project of a friend of mine
Mm.
who was at the NYU Film School, and he asked me to be part of a little show. And so the guys who wrote the Fantastics were the creators of this little show that my friend was directing. So they came to they came to a rehearsal. They saw me performing, and the role I was performing in was very similar to a role in their show, The Fantastics.
Mm.
Pardon me. And so they said, "You're great. We'd love you to audition for The Fantastics." And wow, amazing! That was already a legendary show, and I'd seen it. The very first show I ever saw in New York City was The Fantastics when I was 8 years old,
Ah,
or 9. It was right around the same time.
yes.
And so I had a very strong memory of seeing that show as a very young boy and being kind of just delighted by the magic of it and the mystery of it. And it was very fun,
Mm.
very charming show. So here I am meeting the guys who wrote it 11 years later or whatever, and they're asking me to audition. Okay, that's a really good sign. So a couple months later, I was still in college. I was in the second year in college. A couple months later, I came back to New York City on break, and I did an audition, and they said, "You're great. We'd love to hire you. We don't have an opening at the moment, but now we know that you would be perfect, and we'd love you to come into the show at some point." And I thought, well, I'm in college. It's like I'm not looking for a job, so that's fine. A few weeks later, they called me and they said the guy who was playing the part that I would be playing wants to take the summer off to do a tour of another show. Would you come in and do the show for 8 weeks, like before you go back to college? And it was like, I don't think there any time elapsed before I said yes. I'm being offered the lead role in the longest running musical in the world as my summer job between sophomore and junior year in college. What would I ever say no to about that?
Mm.
And then back to my high school teacher, my high school music teacher, who had started me singing in the first place. He was thrilled. He let me know that where he actually lived was in New York City, and he had a penthouse apartment he wasn't going to be in for the summer. That was a 5-minute walk to the theater.
Wow.
So I lived in a rent-free penthouse while I performed in the longest running musical in the world, which was also the first musical I'd ever seen 11 or 12 years earlier. So I was pinching myself every day, like, is this really happening? Is this really happening? And I did 8 weeks, 64 performances. Sunday night, the show ended. My part of the show ended, and I was in tears. I didn't want to leave. And the next morning, I got on a plane and went back to college. And that afternoon, I was walking around the campus of my college. I was a junior in college, and it was like, did that really happen? Did
Mm.
all of that just happen? And but the bug was there. Having had that experience, I was 19 the day I went in the show. Still was a miraculous and marvelous experience. And I was at a school called the Oberlin Conservatory, which was a brilliant school for the performing arts.
Mm.
professional musicians, uh, p- kids planning to become professional musicians would go to Oberlin. It's like Juilliard is in the U.S. is probably the most famous of the professional music schools. Oberlin is right up in the top 5, so it's a very highly rated school. So it was a wonderful place to perform, and so I just had opportunities to dance and to do opera and to do comedy and to do mime and carnival technique, and just developing myself as a performer in all ways, singer, dancer, actor. And I got to do a tour with a dance company the following summer. We traveled all over the United States, and I was one of the lead dancers in that for the summer. And then I got back to New York early. I was able to leave college a little bit early and still graduate. And the guys from the Fantastics immediately hired me for a workshop. I got in several more shows, and then I was out of work. I was an unemployed actor, and I called the Fantastics and talked to somebody there, and I said, I know you don't know me. It's been a few years since I was in the show, but tell the guys who wrote it that I'm available. And if they ever would like to hire me again, I would love to go back in the show. And he took my name down and went off and did something. And next day he called me back and said, if you will agree to stay in the show for a minimum of 3 months, through the Christmas holidays, Tom and Harvey want to hire you now. They'll fire the guy that's in the show so that you'll come back.
Boy.
It was like, no time elapsed before I said yes. And so there I was back on the show, and I stayed for about a year and a half more, and altogether did about 800 performances. So all during that time, the whole period was like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening, because I had not aspired to any of this as a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a little trumpet player. I was playing a trumpet, and with no illusions that I was some amazing trumpet player and this would be my career. I knew I was pretty good. I was better than most trumpet players in my state, but I wasn't that good. So it wasn't ever a thing for me. So to find myself in the heart of the most legendary show in New York, also at the time, it was the most famous show, was just amazing to me. Like, how did this all happen? And but as time went on, and I had the good fortune, because I was in that show so long, and obviously they loved me. I mean, they fired a guy in order for me to come back, and they would be happy if I stayed till I was old, although I was playing the part of a boy, so I couldn't stay too long. But increasingly I noticed that in my off time, when I wasn't on stage performing, my mind and my heart were going towards spiritual things and towards health things. And I was a raw foods vegetarian by that point, and I was sprouting everything I could and letting them grow and eating them, or doing something else with them. This was the 70s. And so I began to notice I'm not thinking about my career that much, and there's clearly there are boundaries. One day they had me audition. My agent had me audition for a soap opera, a famous one, General Hospital, a very famous soap opera. And I said to my agent, I think I will die if I get this role. I will die. Nothing, no part of me wants to do this show. I said, well, you have to audition. Don't not audition. So I auditioned. My heart was not in it. I didn't get it. Oh, thank God I did not get it. I mean, it would have been excellent money. But I was noticing that my heart was feeling more, there was something drawing me stronger than just being a performer. And I had this amazing good fortune that I was in this show. When I left the show, it was in its 18th year, and it did not close until its 55th year.
Wow.
Longest running musical in the world by far.
Yeah.
And so I had job security for an actor, which is a rare thing.
Absolutely.
And yet I thought, this is not what I want to keep doing. I feel like I'm making an impact on the lives of people for an evening, and maybe they're feeling it still the next morning when they wake up. Oh, wasn't that a lovely show? Weren't they lovely actors? And I'm making an impact for a little while and awakening their heart. And it's a lovely show. It's very romantic and very sweet. There are moments, as I think about it, I choke up, and it's been over 40 years since I was last in that show, and I can still choke up thinking about moments. So it's one of those magical shows that just touches people so deeply. Even today, when people find out I was in the show, and especially if they're from New York, you were in the Fantastics. When were you in it? I'm sure I saw you. I'm sure I saw you. Seem so familiar to me. It has that kind of appeal. So I felt very, very fortunate. But I felt like my interest was in the audience. My interest in the audience was not about how they were responding to me in the show anymore. It was more like, what's your life like? How are you doing?
Yeah.
When Monday morning at 9 a.m. rolls around, are you even going to remember you went to the theater? Or is it stress again and pressure again and money worries and kid worries or whatever? And I found that was really where my heart was going. And
that what
it,
moves you to go to California?
that's
Okay.
exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And, the lights went off in the theater for me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
But another light was turning on, which is what eventually led you and me to have this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what brought you to go to the HeartMath Institute? Did they choose you as well, or how did that happen?
Yeah. The founder of the HeartMath Institute is a gentleman named Doc Childry. Doc
Yes.
Childry. He and I met in 1980, and I was with a publishing company that was also kind of a spiritual community at that time. And he came through. This was in the Bay Area of California, and he came through to take a course or something with us. And he was a really interesting guy, and I could hardly understand him. His accent, he's from the southern part of the United States, very thick accent. It was hard to even, like, what did you say? Say that again. I'm not, I know it's English that you're speaking, but it's some strange dialect. But once we got through that, I realized he was a lovely man, just a sweet, genuine, highly intuitive, extremely caring, gracious human being. And we had long conversations about life and God and consciousness. And it was very memorable. It was a couple of days, and he actually stayed in I had a caravan, a motorhome. So he stayed in that while he was in the area. But this was 1980. There's no email, there was no internet, there was no way to stay in touch. I mean, I could have gotten his address and sent him a letter, but you didn't think about that in those days much.
Yeah.
So I lost touch completely. 7 years later, I see him again. Hey, what's going on? And things had evolved for him. He was already, when I first met him, into the idea of the heart, and that he wanted to do something with his life around the heart. 7 years later, that had evolved quite a bit, and he was definitely thinking about creating an organization of some kind. He didn't have a name for it yet. And over the next couple of years, things kept evolving, and I began to work more closely with him in an informal way, not paid by him. And so I became part of there was a core group that was sort of forming around him that became the core of HeartMath. So I was in HeartMath from before the beginning because I was part of the team before we had even a name called HeartMath. And I was in the leadership of it from day one. So he and I had that close connection we had established almost 10 years earlier was very much alive as the organization was starting. And so I was there from day one, and was part of everything that we built, from the actual grounds, the institute itself, which is a beautiful property in the mountains of outside Silicon Valley, to all the programs, to the books, to all of it. I was very involved in the design and development and delivery of all of that. And then in 2000, I became CEO, and was CEO for 11 years.
Yeah.
So.
And what have you learned through those 11 years?
I know
I'm sure a lot, but if there's anything you could,
yeah,
summarize, at least for yourself.
yeah. Well, I have to, in order to answer that, I have to share the part which I know you know, but
Yes.
your
But
audience
it's
won't.
HeartMath. Yes.
Well, that too. Yeah. Could you ask a larger, more all-encompassing question, like in the same sentence? And what about the nature of God? You could just throw that in as an aside, kind of an afterthought. Well, HeartMath fundamentally it's an institute set up to understand the intelligence of the heart. But that can sound like a very new age, very spiritual, very California concept. And part of what drew me initially and continued to inspire me was that we wanted to take a more scientific approach than most people were taking to the heart. And so, because we believed that if we were going to make an impact in the world, we needed to get people who run life from the left brain bought into the idea of the heart. Those left brain people being the ones who, by and large, run companies, run governments, run school systems, etc. So deciding to use mainstream medicine and mainstream science to validate our theories was, I thought, this is a smart move. As a New Yorker, as somebody who grew up in the New York area, we like evidence.
Yeah.
New Yorkers can, when New York gets behind something, watch out. You'll have the full power of New York, but you got to really prove it. You really got to prove it. And you got to have evidence, and plenty of evidence, and not sound like some kook from California.
Mm.
So I was very drawn to that. So the idea that we would use scientific research to validate the techniques we were teaching was like, this is great. When we first started, we had no idea we would turn into also a technology company.
Mm.
But it was because of the research around what's called heart rate variability that we discovered this was a very valuable way to teach what we were presenting, but also a way to validate it through the science. And then we decided we needed to develop our own technology to show that, and then HeartMath has developed several different like biofeedback technologies, but measuring the heart. So that became a big part of the HeartMath focus over the last decade, especially, well, no, the last 20 years, really. So HeartMath is this system based in science of practical tools that, I mean, there are literally versions for kids before they're in kindergarten, and there are versions for people in hospice, meaning, and everybody in between. So we used to joke, could we find, is there anybody on planet Earth that wouldn't benefit from what we're doing? Because we're not trying to be a new religion. We're not trying to be a new spiritual system. We're trying to be more neutral, a system based in science to validate that the heart is actually intelligent and is something that you should listen to. And it's not just poets who should do that, or singers who should do that, or mystics who should do that. It's everybody. We all have a heart, and we all have another level of intelligence we could access if we understood it. So we just said, for that theory to come to life, you got to have science to back it up these days, because science is God for many people. So that's kind of the background of HeartMath. So to teach that, to develop those ideas, which I was a key part of that process, and to teach it because I was one of the, I think I put more miles on my body for 20 years teaching it than just about anybody. So to do that, you have to practice it, of course, too. So I learned a tremendous amount about the intelligence of the heart, about emotional management, and how emotions are both our friend to understand, because they are a clue to what's really going on in our body, in our mind, in our hearts. But they also can drive us crazy, and they can ruin our relationships, and they can force us to make bad decisions and do things we regret and feel shame and guilt, whatever. So this interplay between the heart and how to manage our emotions was something I became very interested in personally. And so you're asking me, what was the question again? I think it's like, what was a big learning in the 11 years, I think is what you said.
Yes.
So the 11 years I was CEO was marked by a huge transition for me, which is when I was in late 2009 diagnosed with cancer, and it was a large tumor. And fortunately, the doctors were pretty confident they could operate and get the tumor. And based on my overall level of health and my age, they were pretty confident everything would be okay. I'd have to have treatments and whatnot. And that's in fact what happened. They got the tumor. It hadn't spread. I was like, thank you for that. But then some complications arose, staph infections, whatnot. And then the arthritis I'd already been experiencing in my hips for several years, based on being a dancer and running on roads for too many miles for too many years, were catching up with me. And now that my body was kind of dealing with cancer and staph infections, now everything was getting worse fast. And walking downstairs, I felt like an 85-year-old man. And as somebody who was a dancer and an avid hiker, who I could scamper up hills like a goat, I mean, I was very strong in my thighs and my hips. And now walking downstairs, I felt unstable. Like, what? this was worse. That was worse than the cancer or the staph infections. The thought that I was losing my mobility.
Mm.
I was like, this is not okay. Got double hip replacement surgery. A few months apart, and that occurred right after my mother passed away. So this was a rough period. And during all of this, I was having to face some real lessons in myself of, number one, you ignored some symptoms about the cancer for too long. You're a typical guy. Not that it threatened your life because of it, but you ignored some stuff. Number two, you've been ignoring some stuff in your soul. There's this urge in you to create again. And by that point, 9 years, almost 10 years into being CEO, I had been feeling for a while that, thank God, I was still speaking in the public and I was still facilitating leadership teams and all that. But other than that, I felt very little a creative expression anymore. HeartMath had a band for the first 10 years of HeartMath, but then that had to end for different reasons. So I didn't have that outlet anymore. And I wasn't involved creating programs anymore because we had teams for that. And I wasn't involved designing websites or designing brochures because we had talented graphics people that could do that. And they didn't want the CEO messing with that. So I felt like I'd been kind of kicked upstairs, not by nothing intentional, but like
No,
I
sure.
don't have the creative output anymore.
And you didn't have time, I guess, after work to do something for yourself.
No, there were evening activities most nights that I was involved in, whether I was traveling or home. So it was we were building something that we wanted to last for hundreds of years. And so it was all hands on deck, all the time, and being in leadership as well. And it meant even after the other meetings, then there was a leadership meeting to talk about, where do we go next? So, and I loved it in many ways. I was so honored to be kind of at the core of all of it, and very close to the founders still, years later, and many, many one-on-one meetings that we had to talk about the strategy, to talk about my personal challenges and some of my burdens and whatnot. But finally, I realized I had to listen to this prompting in my heart, as scary as it felt. Yeah. And what the message was is that you have to not be CEO. You have to not be in the management anymore. You need to heal. Actually, when I actually made the decision, I had just had my first hip replacement 6 weeks earlier, and 6 weeks later I was going to have the second one done. So I was in the middle of major surgeries. By this point, the cancer wasn't an issue anymore. They were basically saying, it looks like everything's fine, that we keep testing you and there's no sign of anything. So that was fine. The staph infections had stopped, so that was fine. Now I had to relearn how to walk on 2 new hips, but I'm not the first one who's had to do that. And I was very confident that would be okay. And sure enough, it went great. But there was this deeper calling that said, it is time to now step out. Yeah. And to take this into another direction, and not as a rejection of the HeartMath at all. I still teach it all the time. I still teach HeartMath at Stanford University twice a year. But it's time to go into the next phase, and that was the hardest part of that entire journey. Harder than being told you have a life-threatening situation going on right now. That somehow I thought that'll be okay. It's going to be okay. The decision to step down as CEO, to leave my family, in effect, the people that the 30 of us or so had built the whole thing, and most were still there from the beginning, was really challenging. And so I guess in terms of what did I learn, the heart really is intelligent, and if you follow it, it'll be okay, and it will not be an easy ride. Yeah. You will attract the judgments of others. You will attract the doubts of others, the skepticism of others. And I'm not just referring to the people inside HeartMath, although I had some of that, but it's not an easy road to follow your heart. And it feels right to do it. Yes. And thank God for that. And then there's those times when you ask yourself, did I just make the worst decision of my life? Yeah. And you second guess yourself, because whatever's coming back to you is not exactly warm and fuzzy. And so you go through all of that, and you learn.
Yeah, I imagine it might be really hard because people don't understand that you had this high position and suddenly you decide to resign to follow your heart. It's not something really mainstream, as we can say.
Yeah, I think, I think some people that knew me professionally, I mean, knew me in the context of HeartMath, were very honoring of my decision, because um, I think they sensed there was this other part of me that hadn't been able to come out as much, the more creative side. So they were kind of like, "Good for you, good for you. You've been through a lot." And I didn't leave HeartMath. I mean, I still was employed there part time. I still lived within a mile for the next several years. I still went there at lunches, and I tried to make it as painless as possible. I'm not rejecting you guys. I got it. No one here has gone through what I've gone through, and I understand if you haven't, how could you know what the spiritual journey might have been like during that? It's one thing to hear all the physical touch points of that story, but the spiritual, the dark nights of the soul that happened many times. And as I would question, how can I be questioning this? This is a lifetime commitment. How can I be questioning this? Well, because people grow. And this happens all the time. You're convinced that something's going to last forever. That could be a marriage, that could be an occupation, that could be whatever. And down the road, at some point, you start to realize, wait a minute. And we call that a midlife crisis sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it just felt like this is a part of you that needs to come out in ways that are not clear. I did not have a strategy when I stepped down as CEO. It wasn't like, and here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to set up my own consulting company. And no, I'm healing from this hip. Now the other one is really screaming, so that one's getting taken care of. I will be healing a lot, relearning how to walk, meditating, and trying to heal.
Yeah.
Strategy? No, I don't have a strategy. I'm trusting that if I do all that right, the things will emerge that'll show me where I need to go.
Yeah, and that's really interesting what you say, because I guess that from the first, if we could say the first part of your life, things happen. And then like it just happened as if you had like a North Star, like suddenly you went somewhere and people pick you. And it just came like this. And in that case,
Exactly.
You decided to stop without knowing, without having plan B, without knowing what would happen. And it's a really tough decision to do that. I mean, I can relate, so I know.
I had a feeling. Yeah. You're
Yes,
seeing
well,
some.
yes. In my case, I had. It was really surprising when I saw your story, because I didn't have cancer, but I had in 6 months. I was working a lot, the same, not listening, and I had to move country. And then after a month, my father died, and 2 months later, my grandmother died. And then 2 months later, I had a miscarriage, and the treatment was life-threatening. I nearly died. But the thing is, there was also a really strong message that was for me to stop. I never stopped. And I decided in that case to stop, and I had a full year without knowing what I was about to do, but trusting that something would happen. And then that when I became a coach. But I understand that it's people don't understand sometimes that you have to stop and you trust something will happen. And that was the calling with everything that maybe you went through. That wasn't really easy, I guess.
Right.
But and now you're doing Renaissance, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so as I made the exit from HeartMath and had healed pretty well, I had this inspiration one time. It was late 2011. I was in Washington D.C. seeing my brother, the same brother that was playing older brother.
Yes.
And we've remained very close over all these years. And he invited me to go to a Christmas Carol sing-along concert at the Kennedy Center in Washington D.C. And my first reaction was, really, singing Christmas carols with 2,000 total strangers? I don't know. I think I've sung enough Christmas carols I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. And then I think I thought better of that. And I think, why are you being that way? Your whole life now is saying yes to, embracing if life presents you an opportunities, unless it's really crazy and stupid, why not say yes? So I said, okay, great, we'll do this. That night, I had a life-changing experience singing Christmas carols with 2,000 total strangers. And I had a very strong sense, partly from the people around me who were commenting on what a beautiful voice I had. And I was thinking, how can you hear me? There's literally 2,000 people and an orchestra and professional singers all singing these Joy to the World, the first Noel, whatever, together. How can you possibly even hear me? But they were insistent. No, you sound amazing. Can you come sing at our church in Virginia next week? Thank you so much. Wow, I live in San Francisco. It's a little too far for me to come to Virginia. But thank you so much for the invitation. As I was walking out of that theater that night, having just had this very deep conversation with the woman sitting next to me, who basically said she felt that she knew me so well that night. She said, I could have listened to you all night. I said, and I wasn't singing any solos. I was just singing with my heart. And as I was walking out the theater that night, I thought, it was like a voice from my higher self or God or whatever it was, saying, you're supposed to sing again, and your voice needs to be heard again, not just for yourself. Like there is something that you can do with your singing voice that the world will benefit from in some way. So I was like, really? Okay. And I connected with this dear friend of mine who was my college roommate at Oberlin Conservatory, brilliant composer and performer. And we started working together and just hanging out, really. But within a couple of months, we were performing, and we had this project we called What Makes Your Heart Sing? And we called it a keynote performance. And basically, it was a keynote talk, because I'd been doing many keynote talks around the heart and all that. And now I had a health story to share, and the story of kind of rebirth after going through some very scary things. It was a message of rebirth and kind of coming back. And so we did that big performance for this huge healthcare system, Kaiser, which is a major health system in the US. And then that led to another conference, and that led to something else, and that led to something else. And so I was now singing again and performing again and creating these events for large audiences, and with this dear, dear friend, Gary Malkin,
Yes.
longtime buddy of mine. And before long, people started saying to me, and then I was doing more visible things publicly, and the teaching at Stanford was getting more so. And people would start saying to me things like, you're like a Renaissance man. You've had this kind of physical rebirth, plus these parts of you are really coming out more and more. You're dancing again, and you're kind of a noted photographer for your nature photography, and you're singing again, and you're like a Renaissance man. And I would hear this Renaissance man thing, and I thought, that's so interesting. I never thought of myself as a Renaissance man, nor did anyone ever say that to me either. And I thought, that's interesting that it's happening more and more now. I just kind of pondered that and thinking about writing a book, and thought, well, maybe that's the theme of the book. It's not just a book of my story, but it's a story of rebirth. And I was pondering that, and at one point I thought, Renaissance man, there's one glaring problem with that name. If this is more than just a book, which is the word man, and then at some point it just dawned on me, Renaissance human. That sounds, it includes everybody.
Yes.
And I began to develop that idea, and then a year or two later, I was approached about doing an album of original songs, which was another way. It was like when I was invited to come into the Fantastics, like
You've been asked to do
an album.
an
Yes, I was
album.
asked to do an album of original songs
Yes.
with these two amazing singer-songwriter producers, and
Yes.
spent a lot of money. And my answer was, I've never even wanted to write a song. So why would I do this? And then they laughed, and they said, because we see the music in you. We see it. We feel it in you. It's in you.
Yeah.
And we know how to get that out.
The brother Cohen, is it?
Brothers Corin,
Cohen,
yeah, the
yes.
brothers Corin, Isaac and Torald, amazing. They're dear
Yes.
brothers now. So we did that. And as soon as I said yes, fairly quickly. But part of it was because I felt like doing an album, writing songs, which I'd never been involved doing at all and never even wanted to do, was another example of being a Renaissance human. And so the idea of Renaissance human is not just multi-passionate, which is an increasingly popular term. That we love to do lots of things. Why limit yourself at all, ever? I call that Renaissance human, because a Renaissance man or a Renaissance woman always meant somebody who was not just a lawyer or not just a concert pianist, but was both, and an artist. They embraced the fullness. They were fine being the analytical mind because they had the creative side too, or whatever. So they embraced the multiple passions of their life. So I felt like, well, doing this album would be an example of that, because it's a stretch for me. I've never been involved writing songs. All kinds of insecurities can come up around that. Will I be any good? Yeah, I've got these amazing collaborators. They're good. They're great, but it can't just be their things. That's not the point. So am I going to be any good at this? So all that went on, but the energy was Renaissance and rebirth. And so as I pondered this, I've begun to feel that, just as the name Renaissance, of course, I'm speaking to a francophone, is itself means rebirth.
Yes.
And as I've thought more and more about it, that the human experience is many births. There's the big one at the beginning. There's the next big one 11 or 12 or 13 years later, which is like, whoa, what's happening? Ooh, this is cool. Ooh, this is weird. All that's going on. That's another birth. It's biological, let alone emotional. But then there are many others that happen when you learn a new skill. You travel to a new country, you meet someone, you have a certain teacher. I mean, Mr. Pickett, my high school vocal music teacher, completely changed my life. And I didn't see that coming at all, that I would do any of that. So that was a birth. That was, the midwife was Mr. Pickett, in a sense. And so to me, that's what life is. And so instead of thinking, when you have a question about yourself at a certain phase of life, instead of thinking of that as a midlife crisis, why not think of it, oh, there's something supposed to be born now. There's another thing that's supposed to be born, and that this is a normal part of being human. It's not strange. It's not weird. In fact, to lead a life today that is just the same thing, how's that working out for you? if you try that. We live in an age that everything is so unpredictable and uncertain. If you're just stuck in one way and you're convinced life will just always be the same, so therefore you can too, well, it should be pretty obvious by now that it's not. That's kind of not the way it's going to be. So to me, we are all Renaissance humans. Renaissance human is not a term for the creative people. And part of my work is to distinguish between creativity, the artistic expression side of creativity, versus what it takes to lead a fulfilling life, which requires creativity, but not necessarily artistic expression. So I'm basically saying every single human being on planet Earth is fundamentally creative. We all have the power to create life. That energy is built in.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking. Nowadays, like if you think about someone who's been working in an office for maybe 20, 30 years, might say, okay, but I don't have any skills to be creative. But it's not true. You don't have to be an artist, a singer, or painter to be creative, right?
Exactly. I mean, to me, so I do these classes now, online classes around, I'm calling it Creativity Unleashed. And because of the lockdown situations, many people are feeling, get outside. That's one thing. But also it's like there's many people are experiencing a sense that there's all this creative energy in them that's not being used.
Yes, absolutely.
Because and so that's a lot living energy that they're in touch with. And I want to facilitate that. And I'm trying to help people see that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to become artistic, that you're awakening that creative energy. Creative energy. I mean, we are in a creative process right now. I am not working from a script. You may have had questions in mind in some sequence.
I have you, but I need to follow your flow.
Well, that's what's going on. So we are
Absolutely.
creating as we go.
Yeah.
You're responding to me. I'm responding to you. It's a creative process.
Yeah.
I'm trying to help people see their whole life is a creative process, unless they're asleep, and just walking you through. And so they're doing the exact same things every day with no consciousness. Then it's not creative. That's
Yeah.
their choice. But every moment can be a creative choice. Like, what do we want to do today? It's a different day. It's a sunny day. I'm going to go down there earlier. It's warmer today. I'm going to go down. You know, we have all kinds of choice, and therefore
Absolutely.
we can be creating in every moment.
Mm.
And that is the beauty of the human experience, is that we have that ability to do that
Yeah.
and be conscious of it,
Mm-mm.
and to adjust when our choice didn't work out quite like we hoped. Okay, there we adjust. It's no big deal. It's called being human. So I'm basically saying we're all Renaissance humans. It's always about birthing new parts of ourselves, and that can be just in a conversation where things are awakening right now in me and probably in you as a result of this conversation. Something being born. It's called this conversation. And
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something I've seen also that you talk about when you do creativity. And actually, I found I'm just going to show it here for people who have the videos. It's your app that is Time to Thrive.
time out to thrive.
Time Out
Yes.
to Thrive. So I just had it here and I've been playing a little bit this weekend.
Thank you for
And
showing it. Cool.
it looks really great. And one thing
Yes.
I really like, I think it was a meditate, so you can see it goes really well.
Yes. Yes.
It's actually a meditation you've created with your old friend, Gary Malkin, right?
Yes. That's right.
This one was the power of playfulness.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed that one. So can you share a little bit more? Why do you think playfulness is important in creativity?
When I was first developing this course for Stanford around creativity, this was back in 2017, I was thinking about, that I had a lot to share with their audience, which is their employees, staff, faculty, etc. And I thought, well, I'm not an academic when it comes to creativity. So I'm not trying to be the expert, like, oh, Bruce has written the final book on creativity. That was not my interest. My interest was share what you did. And what I did was not a linear process. It was like, I'm getting better. I think I need to, I need to be taking more photos, because when I take more photographs while I'm infusing a strong antibiotic into my arm, it keeps my spirits higher. When I'm looking at the beauty outside me and think, oh, I got to get that picture and then share it. And so there were things that I did in my healing process to get my creativity back, but a lot of it turned out I recognized was a spirit, an attitude of playfulness. That the more I could just be lighthearted about things and not take things too seriously, but to just enjoy them more and be more lighthearted about it. That the energy of playfulness is creative energy.
Yeah.
You look at kids being playful and they're creating a whole world out of rocks or out of little toy figures or whatever it is. They're creating a fantasy world, but the energy is playfulness. So there's something about the energy of playfulness, which is a very powerful aspect of the creative energy that exists in every single human being. It doesn't exist only in the artists. In fact, you've got a lot of very depressed artists, so who aren't necessarily playful.
Yes.
So it's not like only the artists got this, not at all. So playfulness to me is the essence of creative energy. But it takes some time to kind of get back, to allow yourself to get back in touch with it, because it got adulted out of us.
Absolutely.
It's not an actual verb, but I just used it as though it was adulted out of us, right? Because as kids, you could have a conflict on the playground and be fighting, and then you're fine because you're playing.
Yeah.
5 minutes later, as adults, good luck healing from the words said in the staff meeting that you'll never forget. You're never gonna let them forget it. And so, and part of the inspiration for me, and I say this actually in the meditation, is my mother. And my mother, who was in fact a brilliant artist in very many different media, from fine art to sculpture to textile to clothing to Just he was remarkably talented in that way. And yet the energy that I remember most about my mother, who passed away almost 10 years ago, was the playfulness of her energy.
Mm.
And so as a mom, I could have a problem and she would just, let's figure this out. She would just have this kind of, let's get down in there. And so I realized later on that if I could maintain that kind of an energy, and when I say maintain, you're not going to all the time have that kind of energy, and that's not always appropriate. There are other times when being genuine and authentic and deep is what a situation requires. Not playfulness can be the wrong energy at certain times, right? But it's so important for the creative spirit, and especially now in these times where not only is everything so unpredictable, but now it's kind of like, what major global changing event is next? Did anybody see the racial, uh, the issues of racism become a planetary thing? Like, I mean, arguably, especially in the U.S. because of what's going on here, but we don't know what's going to be next, I guess is the point. So the more our spirit can be on the positive side, be more lighthearted, be more playful, to me that's just an essential quality for whatever we're going through, whatever phase we're in.
And that's a really great quality as well, to be present. Because if you want to be playful, you have to be present in what's going on and what can you do to be a bit more playful, which is what children do. Actually, they're not
Exactly.
really in the future, they're playing now. They're doing with what they
Totally.
have. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's really
Well, and even, I don't remember all the specifics now, but the way kids' brains even develop, we're used to the idea that adults operate in the day-to-day world of work and family and whatnot in what are called the beta brainwaves,
yes.
which are high beta, especially if you're stressed out and all that. And if you know how to meditate or if you know how to relax, somehow you get into alpha. Well, a kid's brain doesn't, and then below alpha, there's delta and theta and even gamma. Well, a kid's brain doesn't have the beta yet. That doesn't come on until much later. That their brain does not operate in those frequencies, which are the brain frequencies that allow us to think ahead and plan ahead and do all that kind of stuff that kids are not famously good at because their brain does not operate at that level yet. It eventually grows into it, unfortunately. and for too many of them, the playfulness, as I said, gets adulted out of them. And that playful side gets discouraged, and you need to be serious. You got to do your homework now. You got to get through the grades. You can get into that school, and that whole model that just forces narrower and narrower and narrower and keeps cutting off potentials of what is possible and what is designed in us to be a far more expansive, far more fulfilling life. Not without its scary moments, ever.
Absolutely. So just before starting to close, it reminds me of the techniques of the HeartMath Institute. When for people who maybe don't know, there's a certain breathing techniques, but then you ask something about thinking about breathing from the heart, and then thinking about something that I would say from one of my teachers, make your heart smile. You call it differently, but Paul Linden, one of my teachers, say just think about something that make your heart smile. I think you call it different. I forgot.
Yeah, a lot of the time the language would be recall a positive feeling, recall a positive memory. We often phrase it in terms of something that you have appreciated in your life. So the feeling of appreciation. And that could be for a child, that could be for a conversation, that could be for a dear trusted friend, that could be for that moment on the beach when the sun was going down and it was like, wow, the magnificence of life, whatever can trigger that feeling of appreciation.
Yeah.
So that is a key part of the HeartMath concept, is that we built the circuitry in our brains and our bodies and our hearts of negativity in large part. We've had traumatic experiences in our life, some people way worse than others, of course, but we've all had different hurts and pains and upsets and suffered in some kinds of ways. And to a certain degree, we are living in that past, and the circuitry of what happened to us before, and our perception of what happened to us before, and we continue to project the future based on what happened to us before, because of that circuitry that keeps pulling us back to the past. And part of HeartMath's whole concept was that we've got to develop new circuitry, because it's not like we aren't designed to love and to have gratitude and to have playfulness, but it takes some work, because a lot of that got adulted out of us. I'm kind of liking that phrase. It got adulted out of us.
Adulted, yeah.
It's pretty good, isn't it? It's kind of got a thing to it. So
and that's true, actually. I mean, I'm just thinking about it. It's so true, because I mean, if I can relate, sorry to interrupt, but
sure.
I remember that, I'm talking for myself, during my childhood, I wasn't like a really happy child, not really playful. But I managed to get back to this playfulness through my children. So it's really something about the children, that the quality they have that you don't have in this adulthood. Definitely.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So that's a key aspect of HeartMath, is saying we have to practice positive feelings, because the magnetic pull to feeling a victim, feeling blame, feeling a judgment, feeling guilt, whatever set is unique to us in our life, is so strong. Because as Joe Dispenza, who's a dear friend of mine, as he would say, we're living out of stress physiology. We're literally living out of the past. This stuff that's stored in our memories, in our bodies, of past hurts, past traumas, etc., becomes our future, because we can't help but see life through the lens of those past hurts. And the physiology that we've developed of defense and fight, flight supports that worldview. Stay vigilant. Someone's going to get you. And now it's a virus, and then it's the government trying to steal all our freedoms, and then it's now it's black people, and now it's trans people, and it's whatever. North Korea, the Illuminati, the New World Order. It's something that's out to get us. So as a result, we're living in this constant fear, and we're sure that somebody is going to get us, because there's so much evidence. Well, that's one way to live it. And not to say that there aren't bad people trying to do bad things, but from the standpoint of what we can control and what choices we get to make, which we still have a massive amount of control. HeartMath says we have to practice the positive emotions, but as we do, and that awakens this power in us, kind of like I'm saying around this creative energy is a realize we've got, because it was adulted out of us young. Don't be doing that, Stephanie. You got all the makings of a wonderful doctor. Just, I think you can be a great doctor, but don't do anything creative, please, because you're just not that good.
Yeah.
Billions of people were told that. So that creative energy in them, whether they're a great artist or not, was never the point. There was an urge to want to contribute, to create, to collaborate. That's the urge gets shot down. So that's my mission, is to awaken that. And HeartMath was a big part of that, because HeartMath showed so beautifully that when we're doing things that we love, that make our hearts sing, everything works better. Brain's functioning better, the heart's functioning better, immune system stronger. When the COVID thing started happening here in the States, and I've been living in a building of about 1,000 people live in this 50-story apartment building, and the fear was everywhere. And even the young 30-year-old doorman, who was very afraid. And I said, here's what Andy, and I know this too. Fear shuts down immune function. So if you want to open the door to COVID-19, it's like putting a sign on the door saying, COVID-19, welcome here. My defenses are down. That's what fear does. Absolutely. I'm not saying be stupid. I'm not saying just walk into a crowd of sick people and just start breathing deeply. No, do all the things that the doctors are saying. You be sensible. But the fear, as justified as it is, especially if you're old, especially if you're at risk, is still going to weaken your immune system. It's just the science. So to me, that's a lot of the contribution of HeartMath, is saying, we can live in fear. We always have that choice, and a lot of it is justifiable. We're human. Who wouldn't feel some fear with what's going on,
Of course.
and feel it every day, financially, if not physically. And we know that if we stay there too long, it depletes us. It sets up the wrong energetics to go out to the world. It attracts more fear, if anything, and not less. So I think HeartMath is in its message of positivity and using the heart as the guide, and using the intelligence of the heart is so important at times like this, because we need that anchor, that we can get through this. But we got to do this together, guys. We can't be just looking out for ourselves only. We're one. As I was saying to somebody the other day, I said, in case there was any doubt that the human race was actually connected, COVID-19, did that prove it to you? In case that didn't do it, the financial collapse of the world, oh, that didn't do it either. Okay, well, we'll throw racial discrimination at you. Oh, that's not doing it. Okay, well,
let's find another one.
well, and something else will happen. Alien invasion. Maybe that's what'll be happening next.
Yeah. So Bruce, just the last question. I was thinking, now you're doing Renaissance. What would you wish for people by doing your Renaissance and your work? What is your wish?
I get the joy every time I'm working with people, that a confidence, a delight, a playfulness awakens. And to watch that happen, I'm in the middle of a group now. Tomorrow will be the third session of a fourth session course. And tomorrow, about half the class will present their final project. Could be a photo essay. Somebody's writing a book. He's presenting the idea for his book. He's already a best-selling author. He's got some new book he's going to share with us. People are doing different projects. What has been marvelous, and this is a group of 28 people from 12 different countries, 4 states, very diverse in that way, is the excitement, is the delight that turns on more and more. And it's not just inside themselves, it's the excitement for the others and seeing what they're going through. And somebody learning something from Adam, who is a meditation teacher, who's a dear friend of mine who's in the class. Somebody else learning from Cecilia, who's this marvelous, so skilled artist. She's Danish. Somebody else from Ausa, Icelandic goddess, friend of mine, who is just remarkable, and a mother of 4, and just very down to earth, and just got this radiance to her. And so watching the different people's unfoldment over just a short few weeks is very joyful, and I think it's very inspiring to everyone, like the learning and the connection that they feel inside themselves in connection to others. And so that's been just a great source of joy for me, because I'm increasingly by the day more and more in touch with the source of that creative energy in me. And so my greatest joy now is being able to text a vessel, a way to begin to awaken that even more and more in people too. I mean, it's not like it's not awake at all, or people wouldn't be even wanting to do something like this. But as we know, there are levels of awakening.
Yeah.
And there's the level of awakening when it's hitting the alarm on your phone off. Like, okay, that's one level of awake. But then a meditation you go into a few minutes later, whoa, now there's a whole nother level of awake, right? So there's a whole spectrum. So to watch that process happen fairly quickly, and the delight in people that happens because they're thinking, they're looking at life differently. They're looking at a flower differently. They're looking at an email differently. It's really delightful, and it's very heartening. And to me, I think we can't get enough of that kind of energy right now. It's just so essential. Absolutely. Especially now.
Absolutely. Great. Bruce, before we leave, I have a small gift for you.
Oh my goodness.
Really small. As you were talking about connection, I wanted to share something with you. It's about someone who had some connection with you in the past. And when I was talking to her a few days ago, she said like, oh, I don't know if he remembered me, but I would just say hi. So there we go.
Hi Bruce, this is Rupta, and I don't know if you remember me. I met you many years ago, 15, 20 years ago, when you showed me the HeartMath machine, and I was with Miten and David Pramal. You might have remembered them, they're musicians, and we met you at a conference, a seminar, and we came up to your suite or hotel room, and you showed us the machine. We were a bunch of us there, so, and it was many years ago, so you might not remember me, but I just wanted to say hello from Australia.
What a treat.
That's Rupa G, who's now in Australia. She was raised by Osho, so she's like a big,
Oh,
big
right.
meditator. And she
Right,
said she
right.
knows you. So I was like, sometimes it's funny when you meet people after so many years, and who knows? You will be.
That was like a reality show all of a sudden. Who am I about to see? Like,
You got scared,
ex-girlfriend.
right?
Anyhow, so that was what a delight. Yeah, it's great to see her again. Lovely.
So she will be presenting the embodiment conference as well. So
Oh,
you might see
fantastic.
her very soon.
Fantastic. Lovely.
So Bruce, it was a pleasure talking to you. And
What a pleasure for me
where
too.
can we find you now if people want to look for your work or want to reach you out?
Well, social media, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, those three especially. I have a website, a couple of websites, my name, brucecryer.com. It needs an upgrade. It looks like it was created about 5 or 6 years ago, because it was, and but it's got an essence of a lot of what I do now. And there's this Renaissance human idea. I'm going to be developing that even more so soon, and it's going to be there's a website, renaissancehuman.co, renaissancehuman.co, for that project as well. So between social media and a couple of websites, I'm pretty out there. And YouTube, got a little bit YouTube stuff too. Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much,
much,
Bruce.
Stephanie. What a lovely energy you have, and you draw out a lot. your receptivity draws out a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Let me know what you like from this episode, what inspired you, or what you've learned. Please leave a review and share it to your friends. And don't forget, it's all connected and we might not even know it. See you very soon.